Hi guys, and welcome to the Kamerastore YouTube channel. We are talking about the future of film. What will film be in the 2030s, in 10 years? Will we have film photography? Will film die? That's the narrative that we've had for the last, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, film will die. And we kind of think that it might not. Something has happened in the last 5 years. And to join me in the conversation, Nico from Kamerastore and Nico's Photo News, so he knows everything about the analog industry, pretty much as much information as anyone in the world. And Dan, who has a lot of information on the users, because you run workshops around the world, you run an Instagram account that must send you so many DMs that it's it's probably impossible. But I wanted to kind of grasp on this first, a little memory down the memory lane. Future of Film was actually a crowdfunding campaign. In 2016, we tried to make a conference where we would have invited all of the major analog players into Finland, and then we would have taken these kind of talks and had a YouTube channel stream of all of it. And it never materialized. We didn't get enough money at that point. But now we are here, 8 years later. The whole analog industry has changed. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of excited about this conversation. So to start off, in a different video, at some point, or Save Analog Cameras campaign in 2016 again, I highlighted the different aspects of what needs to be alive for film photography to have a future. And in 10 years, will these aspects, what could you confirm? Can you confirm in a short way that these aspects would be fine in 10 years? And well, let's start with chemistry. We need chemistry for film.
Well, chemistry is probably, at least for black and white, it's one of the easiest things to mix. Like, it's easy, it's profitable, which is important to mention. Mm-hmm. It's probably the most profitable part for Ilford and Kodak and all these is chemistry, because most of it is water in one way or another. So the components, price-wise, is actually quite sustainable money-wise, which is important. We want an industry that's sustainable. Mm-hmm. Chemistry is easy, black and white. Color chemistry has had a big hiccup with Tetanal going bankrupt, like 3 times in a row, and now finally dead. But Kodak has picked up making color chemicals again. We have ECN2, we have C41 kits, E6 kits. Adox has also picked up on that, and Bellini. So we do have chemistry pretty safe. There is still a risk with CD3 and CD4, which are the main components for color chemistry, which are only being made, as far as I know, mainland China. Obviously, things can change, regulations and, things for like the ecosystem and the, safety of chemical hazards and whatnot. But it should be safe.
Then next aspect, this is actually a bit odd, but people, will there be humans left interested in film photography? Dan, I think this one.
I think so. So from a, there are two main groups of people who are shooting, right? There are hobbyists and then there are professionals, because even the prosumers are still, they're hobbyists, right? If they're not making a chunk of your living from it, then it's a hobby, or it's something you do for fun, but you don't have to do. And the professionals will continue. Every single commercial photographer I know who shoots film will shoot film as long as film is available. If they can do it, they will still do it. If it's available 20 years from now, they will still be spending money on it and making money from it. And it's an easy transaction for them because of that. So there's a big benefit to anyone who makes a living from it to just keep investing in it, which is really important. I think the hobbyist world, I actually think that this resurgence that has introduced film and analog to a brand new generation who are interested in it because it's an antidote to everything they grew up with. I'm thinking of the generation that's grown up not just as digital natives, but they've almost grown up as touchscreen natives. They've grown up with the idea of having a smartphone that has access to the internet all the time being normal, like their parents had it when they were kids and everything else. They're so disconnected with things like that from touch and feel and emotion that this old thing is not old to them. It's actually really new and really fantastic and amazing. And that's not a fad. That relationship that's been built is not a short-term thing. It's very different from like certain fashions coming back and just being a blip in clothing, for instance, or vinyl is still kind of a fad. It's got a small little fan base, but you can enjoy music and you don't need to ever play it on vinyl. But the experience of shooting and the delayed gratification, like that's something that's inherent to analog, can still be faked with digital, but I think people get the difference. And so I think we're going to rely a lot on the hobbyist side of things, on the majority of the consumers really, on this newer wave of people who are really loving it. And because they're loving it, they're saving their pocket money, their allowance, or whatever money they make from their job if they're in their teens or their 20s. Like they're choosing to use disposable income on this medium, which I think is really, really important. And I see that as being one of the main reasons that film is building. It's not that there are, tons of new professionals shooting analog, right? It's people who are casual photographers. And whether they're buying instant cameras, or they're buying the Pentax or the Rollei new cameras, or even Leicas, or they're just buying some old camera from wherever they've sourced it, right? They're getting into it because they want to. And I think there's a really special thing there, and that tells me it's here to stay. Especially because I think when those teens and 20-year-olds start having kids, they're more likely to want to document their kids on film. I think I'm reaching a little bit from anecdotal evidence, but in the last 2 or 3 months alone, I've had friends who are not photographers, who have a film camera or have just bought one, coming to me, and the reason that they're doing it is because they're about to have a kid. And they don't want to shoot it on their smartphone or on a digital. They feel like it's more important than that. And that's a really interesting, tiny bit of evidence that says people associate a physical medium with something that'll last. People don't trust digital in the same way. So I think that just that idea isn't going away.
And as an anecdotal evidence, I started shooting film when my first child was the negative became important when my first child was born. So yeah.
And I'll add to the people part. What I think we've seen in the past with film photography surviving was the hardcore enthusiasts that would shoot film, develop film, and print film in the darkroom. But now as we've moved forward, we've kind of there's no barriers that much. It's fuzzy. People shoot film, scan film, publish it on social media, shoot film, scan film, make prints, shoot film, develop film, and print film on paper. So it's no longer there's only one path. It's very accepted. And I think in the next 10 years, if we go into that, people will shoot film, develop film, however, and share it in whatever comes in 10 years. That won't be different. But the initial start of the photography part will be a bit more valued. Like I said, it's a physical object. There's a negative that you can preserve. You can print it if you do want it. What I think is a lot of people have decided is printing is important, but there's less professionals, but it's still an option, and it's growing in many labs. Is the printing, physical print.
I think that's one of the big people-related measurements, metrics, is how many more people are printing, whether they're professionals or hobbyists. It doesn't matter. They're getting their scans maybe, but they're printing more now than they were 2 or 3 years ago. And again, that's more of an investment. People are spending even more money, even as the costs are going up. And I think if you have any market where, as the costs increase, people are willingly spending even more on it, that's a secure thing.
Cost increase segues our way to the next one. We have chemicals, we have humans, will we have film?
Yes, film had a huge fall maybe a decade ago, where Kodak went bankrupt, Polaroid went bankrupt, many other brands, Agfa, Ferrania, all these went bankrupt. But whatever survived has been on the lifeline, and the prices that we saw, there was a competition there between Fuji and Kodak to the bottom, and they were just trying to keep things running because maybe if he dies, I'll be the only one, and then I can push prices. Fuji kind of like found a different way of dying, which was not dying. They just made more success somewhere else. And they're like, well, let's forget film. And they keep Instax because they make a lot of money. But like roll film and sheet film has kind of died from Fuji. But Kodak is now the color player and is increasingly growing out of capacity all the time. So they can't spool fast enough. They can't convert fast enough. More people are shooting Super 8, 16, 35. All the video clips are done in this stuff. Like film is very there. And they've been bringing back stocks. We've seen the 3200 black and white. We've seen the Ektachrome slide film. This has come, but they've also said that they're investing heavily. So there is a future to film. And Nolaris, which is the trademark of Kodak still photography, has been purchased by somebody, which means that probably Rochester, the ones making the film, has said, yay, we'll probably continue to make it. If not, you don't buy a trademark.
Yeah.
And then there's the Ilfords of the world that have continued to make black and white through everything, but now coming out with new color film like Phoenix, and Orwell coming with some film. And there's film is probably here, and the main question is not film as black and white, which is semi-simple to make, is the color film, which is the huge chunk of the market is here. In 10 years, we will have color film. It's just won't be how many players will be in the color film.
Yeah, but that's an amazing thing to say, because in 2016, when we were having this, there was no security that in 10 years there's like any color film. So, but now we can, with as you know, reasonable certainty, say that there will be color film in 10 years.
A great example, I think, in how something can survive if enough people, again, vote with their wallets, right? That the consumers we vote with our wallets. If we want something to survive, we have to keep buying it and paying for it, as long as someone is willing to keep making it, right? That's the partnership. And my entryway into photography, full stop, I had some cameras and stuff when I was younger, but I was not a photographer, and I was playing around with a couple of early digital cameras, right? And even though I'd probably shot film point and shoots when I was younger and just not thought about it because that was just a camera. But when Polaroid announced that they were discontinuing their film in the mid-2000s, I had a couple of friends who shot SX70s, and I kind of had this massive FOMO where I was like, oh, I want to be able to shoot some of these before they go away, and that camera looks really cool. It'll look nice on my shelf. And I went and bought a camera, bought a couple of packs of film while you could still get them at the drugstore, and fell in love with it, and was immediately really sad that it was about to go away. And so I just bought up whatever film I could and just shot it for a couple of years. But when the Impossible Project announced that they were a thing and that they were going to try and keep it alive, I was like, whatever disposable income I have to buy that film, I don't care how crappy it is. The first pack I ever bought of the Impossible, that silver shade stuff that they made, I got one good picture out of it. It's actually still one of my favorite pictures ever.
And you had to scan it immediately because it disappeared.
Because it disappeared, right? Yeah, like, oh, it was just horrible. Anyone who shot that stuff knows it was.
I still have the initial packs. They still work.
Do they really?
I've shot them and they still work.
I'm amazed.
They work as good as the first.
As good as they first did. But I didn't care that I got one good picture out of it. Yeah. I got one good picture out of it, and someone was willing to keep making it. Yeah. And I said, all right, as long as you're making this and trying to make it better, or just even keeping it around, I will keep paying for it, because I knew that that was the relationship. Yeah. And I think it's the same with
roll film,
roll film, same with everything. If we keep investing in it, there are enough of us being everyone who's interested at any level in shooting any kind of film. And it's important to note that Fuji's Instax, it might be a tiny percentage of what Fujifilm as a corporation makes, right? Their entire photography division, including their digital work or digital cameras, is worth something like 1% of all of the money they make. Like they could ditch it and not be hurt. But it's one of the highest selling product categories on Amazon every Christmas.
Yeah. And it has a color negative in every sheet.
Yeah. This is
it's the same base thing underneath
film,
in some,
and that's color film, right? And that's and instant film is even more complicated than roll film and sheet film chemically. So I think that we've already got enough evidence that 2006-07 was when Polaroid discontinued their film. Yeah, we're a long way from that now. We've got brand new Polaroid cameras and film, and if that can survive, and that's a niche compared to roll film, I think we're in a safe place.
the next step from that is that the players need to manufacturing film, manufacturing chemistry, even labs that do the work for the people. They will need to invest in machinery. That is, this is not cameras. This is developing machines. This is industrial scanners. This is this kind of thing. When we were doing the original conversations 8 years ago, there was no sign that any of these would have any future. And what is the situation now?
Labs have been dying and coming back to life, and they already have been growing a lot. So we had the decrease, and a lot of the Fuji Frontiers and all these Noritsus have been, now there's companies that are experts at, refurbishing them, putting back into labs. But labs have been growing everywhere. Like Madrid had a few labs, now has a bunch more. Like Miami is a great example. Dan comes from Florida. My wife is from Miami. Miami had no labs for a few years.
Yeah,
no
they'd all shut down. Yeah.
And now you go to Miami, there's like 3 to 4 labs at the very moment, if not more.
It's the same throughout the UK. Like the number of labs that have opened in the last 3 to 5 years is more than the number of labs that existed before then.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they're 2 people running it. The point is that there's a market for it, and there's enough demand that they're all busy. They're all at capacity.
Yeah, and towards machinery, the thing that's very hard here is the Fuji machines and the Noritsu machines cost millions to develop and to make. And that's a legacy product that we're trying to keep alive, and we need to keep alive, and labs depend on them. But there are some efforts. There's the French scanning, the Auda scanner that hopefully will help with scanning 35. There's camera scanning, which is now a thing because digital sensors have gotten so much better that they can actually capture a lot of the latitude on film, and conversion is becoming easier and better. There's talks behind the scenes of like maybe some tool for removing dust through AI and Adobe and whatnot. Like there is future to a lot of the machinery. It will never be as good as it was. I don't think we'll see a Frontier FP4000 coming in 5 years, but the labs are kind of resilient to die because there's demand. Like you said, your wallet is calling, like, I need film developed. They'll figure it out. They'll do it with a Jobo. They'll do it with whatever they can.
Yep.
And there's lots of levels there and a lot of professional equipment. The most important is that the equipment that exists can be kept running. And most of them are quite foolproof. They were made for very simple operators to keep them running. So as long as they're spares, you can make.
They're industrial level pieces of equipment too. They're meant to process so much film, and as long as you're taking care of them, as long as you're swapping the chemistry out, as long as you're, as long as there are people who are willing to learn how to maintain them, because obviously, like, it's the same as with cameras, right? The number of trained techs, factory trained techs are dwindling,
going down,
and or retired and just not working. But I know, like some of my favorite labs in London, their staff members, some of them are becoming experts at not just maintaining all of the hardware from the scanners to the mini labs, but they're actually starting to develop they're learning about the circuit boards, because those circuit boards that are so old that they're actually pretty simple by today's standards, so developing brand new ones to replace something that's gotten burned out is actually doable.
It's where technology kind of can save this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I always say, film photography survived thanks to the internet. It kind of is a little bit of a similar thing, but now we have Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. And then there still is people like Colenta is one brand that comes to mind that survived making some other products for the photography industry, because we think photography is still photography, but there's X-ray photography and there's other things. And now we're kind of like super busy making dip and dunks and making like rollers and paper RA4 machines for labs and universities. And universities who ditched them all are buying them again.
Buying them back. I do think that there is a need for a cottage industry of new equipment for labs. You know, a lot of, you mentioned camera scanning. Most of the camera scanning hardware is targeted at individuals. Doesn't mean it can't be used by labs, but there's not much in the way of automated systems yet.
Yeah, not yet.
But that's only a yet. It's totally possible. And we're already at the point, as you said, where the digital camera sensors themselves are good enough. They're only going to get better, but they don't need to get better. The speed of those sensors is super quick. The minute that becomes automated, they'll actually surpass a lot of the older scanners.
There's people like Silversots that has made their own machine with a Phase 1 and a guy that's like scanning, and they have the color because they're used to it, and they're already camera scanning at a speed greater than many people with the Frontiers. So I think machinery-wise, there'll be a lot of inventions and a lot of kind of self-taught or not self-taught engineers that are like, hey, now there's a market. And it's
that's
back to the circle. Like, there's people wanting it, so someone will sit down. I was contacted by someone in Spain yesterday about the future development for lab tools, like in a high end. And this guy's like scratching his head like, well, maybe I can design some like Noritsu or something.
Yeah, and I think the big story there is that companies will invest if they have demand of the service. So Colenta is getting orders, and Reforma, I think it's the Danish. There's two Dip and Dunk companies that do full labs, and they are getting orders for their 70,000 euro machine or 100,000 euro machine, because there are companies that will make it as a profit. So machines are not a problem, film is not a problem, developing is not a problem, humans is not a problem. Then we have two left, and in our case, they're kind of connected because they're cameras and they're know-how. And we could talk about the know-how of chemistry or things like that, but it's maybe easiest to talk about the know-how of cameras because we are here at the center of know-how in the world for cameras. But let's go with the camera problem.
You have used camera problem, new camera problem. New camera problem, we made a video about, the Pentax 17, the Rollei, the Leica M6, the Instax cameras, things like that. That's a good problem to have. People are making new cameras. Good. Then the used camera problem is a very different topic, because used cameras will diminish in amount and diminish on viable amount that can be serviced and put into the market. And we'll slowly lose the electronic ones, even though, yes, you can make a circuit board kind of, but we're talking cameras, they're small. So they're slowly going to be a diminishing, but the amount of volume, and most of those cameras were made to be serviced. So they are professional level cameras that are meant to be greased and kind of like up and running. But there will be obviously a significant decrease on the ecosystem of used cameras. So I think the know-how is important, and there's people that can fix them and put them back in service. But I'd say the biggest thing to keep cameras alive is don't try to open it if you don't know what you're doing.
There is a direct relationship, though, between the number of knowledgeable people and the quality of that knowledge who can maintain and repair the cameras, and how long the cameras will last. Like, we can have a longer tail of the used camera market existing and functioning, the more people are around to keep them functioning. Because the photographers are not the ones who are keeping them functioning. As long as we don't open them incorrectly, don't try and fix them ourselves, don't drop them, any of that. As long as we treat them well. And there's another element to that too, because we need the knowledge and the people who can maintain and repair. But then we also have the requirement for the people who own the cameras to realize they need to be maintained. And I think that's currently a big missing link. Most people, and I'm including a lot of the commercial film photographers I know, they don't realize that they need to or should be maintaining the cameras, even if it's like once a season or once a year, once every couple of years. Like, most people's approach of the people I know, again, this is anecdotal, but it's like, I think it's the internet says that this is how people behave. They wait until it breaks. The minute it's not working correctly, then they put it in for servicing. And if you're a professional, especially, if you were a pro 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you would have them serviced when you had a bit of downtime if you knew you'd been beating them up. I mean,
it's kind of like a car.
Yeah,
like don't
preventative maintenance is important.
And I think people do break a camera and then send it to service, or wait till it needs it and send it. First, there's less technicians, a lot of queues, and you don't want to have no camera. But I think the people that are really invested in it have multiple. So you kind of like have 3 or 4, and there's always one rotating to mechanics or technicians to get it fixed. But yeah, you should, if you can do a preventative service, the problem is the addition of the cost for most users, especially in the hobbyists, when there's so many used cameras still available. It's like, well, I'll just put it on the table, I'll buy another one.
I know a lot of people aren't going to do that, but I think it's one of those things that how much longer will the machines last? Well, the answer is longer if people take care of them more, and that's not just about the knowledge and the technicians. If no one brings their camera in to be serviced, they just go, it's broken, I'll buy another one. That's one more machine that's off the market. Yeah. And so I think there's a responsibility of the people who own the cameras to make sure that they're taken care of by people who know how to take care of them. Then we get into the question of how well do people on the maintenance side know what they're doing? And I know that's a point of contention across the industry. Basically, it can be a whole lot better than it is. And I'm saying that as the outsider, not on the inside of Kamerastore or Kamerescue. As a person who loves photography, loves the cameras that I own, I'm also saying this as someone who sent my M6, my old M6, to Leica in Wetzlar for a CLA, and it was there for 12 months. Most of that is sitting in the queue, right? But I need it to work. Yeah. I don't want it to get to the point where it can't be repaired, so I'm willing to not have it for that period of time to make sure that it will last that much longer. But I would like that to not be a 12-month delay. And if Leica has that problem, like the industry, I think has a long way to go as far as having enough people who have the right knowledge in order to start like keeping these things circulating faster.
It's the right people with the right knowledge and the right approach.
Right.
Yeah. Because you can have knowledge and kind of make the camera kind of work, but then there's the approach of like how much can you actually do that's feasible economically. Like a CLA, which is the clean lube adjust, is the traditional way of like kind of keeping a camera running. It's like the changing oil and a couple filters in your car. But if you wait till it breaks, then some parts are way beyond repair. And we have examples internally in the store. We have the Mamiya RZ has the traditional, like when you caulk the Advance. Initially, it was done with a very non-great metal, and if you force it, it'll just strip everything, and that's kind of a donor body now for the other parts. But then Mamiya themselves, when they got them for service, and the places the people serviced them, they were like, yeah, let's remove that piece and put a nicer one. And they went to a CNC or something like that piece, and we have some images that you can see the differences. And one is like those metal, like the car toys that you can bend, like the classic cheap cars. And the next one is like this hardened steel, like so you can't strip it. And that's knowledge that you have to know how to do it, and you have to have the spare parts. We have worked here at Kamerastore to invest in spare parts when needed, but most times we have bought a lot of spare parts and we get offered a lot of spare parts, but every time they come, we get 12,000 references, and the 3 we need are never there because it's a common failure point in the camera. So then you can start investing into making them. And yes, we have all 3D printers and we have all kinds of technology and Chinese people that can make miracles nowadays. Our phones are an example of it. But when you say, I want this spring, but I only need 500 units or 200 units, it comes to a lot of complexity to what's the material you need, what's the tension it needs to have for the shutter speed to be correct, and all that.
I think so this is this is obviously out of all of these questions, this list of questions, this is the hardest one because this is also a human problem, right? It's a knowledge problem on both sides. It's also a resource problem, like the parts, like we only have as many parts as we have until we can manufacture new ones.
And it's a value proposition. Yeah. We have 2 M6s on the table, correct? Yours refurbished by Leica and mine brand new. If I say, hey, that's being refurbished, the new parts in there, and it's the same price as the new one, why would I buy the old one? I'll buy the new one. Yeah. But now let's say there's no new camera. There's yours that's being refurbished and mine that hasn't been refurbished, and we're in the marketplace, open marketplace, C to C. I compete, like, why would I pay more for Dan Rubin's Leica? It's being serviced. I don't care. This one says it works. And as long as the competition is at that level, and I've always said, like, Kamerastore, what we do here, all we need to do is sit on our hands, keep working, and in 5-10 years, we'll be the ones. But then we can't also fulfill all the market, because the cameras and the users will be, like you said, less maintained, more broken, not serviced before they break. And we will be like, well, we have an option. Be like, yeah, but you're too expensive. And you'll be like, well, this is being maintained, so it will last another 5-6 years with normal use, and then service it again, hopefully.
Eventually, the more expensive option will become the only option if it goes in that direction.
But as a consumer myself, it's hard to justify paying maybe a little bit more than the average market value but then the experience happens that you buy something, doesn't work, you get upset.
And I think that's the interesting thing between the used market and the new market. right? And it's not just in cameras, right? That would be the same for a car. You know, the used car. Well, it has 4 wheels, it runs, it starts, but if you don't know for sure how it's been maintained and like what has happened to it, whether it's been in an accident or not, like what's been covered up, what's been hidden from you, it could break down at any minute, and it's something that you need to be reliable. It might not be like break down in a way that causes you harm, or maybe the brakes fail when you're on a highway, right? But for some reason, people with a car, I think people understand the concept of it. Not that people don't go and go and buy a cheap car that might break down on them, but they understand that it might not work and that there is value. They might not want to spend that, but they understand where the value comes from in spending more.
They go for the warranty, usually. That's the one way you can kind of like limit that is the consumer to consumer. Dan Rubin's like, it comes to me, oh, it breaks, what can I do? I can go fight with Dan Rubin about, hey, but if I buy it from a reputable place with customer service and warranty, then yes, you have that security.
Well, you buy it from a big brand, right? I mean, that's objectively, it's subjective, but I'm on the outside, right? So I can say this, that Kamerastore is a big brand for getting a bit of used photography gear, right? In the US, if you're getting, a used car, you can get it from like a one-off used car dealer that like has a plot of land and buys cars, and who knows whether they'll be good or not. Who knows whether they'll be around in 2 years if you need to get it fixed or a warranty repair. Or you can get it from like Volkswagen's used dealer, and you feel like that's more reliable, like you can trust their warranty. That, again, in the car world, people understand that. Yeah. They don't always make that choice, but they understand it. I think there's still a lack of understanding in the used analog camera world that is actually a possibility. Yeah. That there are differences you can get it from a camera from eBay. Yeah. And I don't care if eBay's return policy means that you can return it and get your money back if it's not working. That shouldn't be why we buy things. Yeah. That, well, if it's broken, I can get my money back. No, you want a working thing.
It's a feasible thing to do. I don't think that it's just us, the only people that have reliable gear. I would say you should buy from a place you can go and say, hey, this doesn't work.
That's the thing. Like, what does reliable mean in that way? Like, I would rather trust a local camera store that's been there for 30 years, because at least I'm pretty sure they'll be there in 6 months when their 12-month warranty needs to be activated.
I love this conversation, but for the short answer,
you have a lot of notes on there.
I have a short answer for this years. Because cameras in 10 years, there's 100 million unused cameras in Europe. There's 100 million unused cameras in the US, and there's 100 million unused film cameras in Japan. So there's 300 million cameras still to dig from. So there will be, even if only 10% of them work in 10 years,
we're not going to run out of them.
There will be 30 million cameras still for the community, and we won't be that huge of a community. We will be 2 million people, 5 million people, something like that. There will be at least one camera for. And the other part,
10 of them.
No, that's true.
And then the other part of it is that we have the new cameras that are now warranted to be serviceable in 10 years. So the short answer is yes, we will have cameras in 10 years. And I like that.
Well, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it there.
It is curious for everyone who's watching to just think about on their own. That is the only question, though, that has like this big asterisk hanging over it, because we are dealing with, if it's film, it's brand new product. If it's chemistry, it's a brand new product. Even with the scanners, if it's camera scanning, you're using a new digital camera and new equipment to make it happen. Yeah. The old cameras are the only place that we're stuck with what we have, and what we have is plenty. Yeah. But it means that it is just a little bit of a different dynamic.
Yeah, you need actual camera technicians and actual camera mechanics to make them work. Yeah. And make them run.
Yeah, if we don't have the technicians, those hundreds of millions of cameras won't be much use.
Yeah. So we'll work on that. But going back to, now I think we've covered all of the aspects that might, say that, film will die in 10 years. We've kind of declared that none of them are actually a threat in that sense anymore. So then the question is, what will film photography be in 10 years? How does it compare to digital photography? How does it compare? Is it 100,000 old men with black and white Hasselblads and Durst enlargers worldwide, or is it professional still? What do you think?
Well, let's take a quick reverse look, for lack of a better term. If we rewind the calendar to 10 years ago,
yeah,
how much has that landscape changed, practically speaking? Like how different is film photography today than it was 10 years ago? I think that's probably a good measure of the trajectory. There are a lot of things that are better about it. There are some things that are different, but I mean, 10 years ago, 2014, film hadn't had its resurgence fully yet, but it was already on the rise compared to, like, I was shooting from about 2006-07 with that Polaroid.
Yeah.
And then I had my first 35mm SLR about 2008, and I was in medium format in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And there was so much film available and all these things, and it died over those next couple of years.
Yeah.
But it was really Instagram. I mean, we talk about the internet saving film. Instagram did a big chunk of that. Flickr was doing a lot of it.
Yeah. Flickr started.
The early heavy
Instagram
lifting.
Instagram gave us the more direct connection.
It popularized it.
Killed it.
And but in that 2012 to 2014 range, I was already seeing an uptake just in people. I was already shooting it, but people around me were starting to shoot it more. So we've already and now 10 years from that, we're in a totally different environment with new generations discovering it, and the pandemic having encouraged more people to try new things that are old things and tactile. I think that we're just going to see an amplification of that. This, what's it going to look like 10 years from now? It's going to be stills photography. It's going to be, we're going to have more people making films on film. This year at the Oscars, most of the Best Picture nominees, I think all but one, someone can fact check me on that, but most of the Best Picture nominees were shot on film.
Yeah.
So the motion picture industry and fans in the cinema and the Academy are all, that's not why they were the best pictures, but it's like quality work is being made on that. If you look at the covers of fashion magazines, a lot of them are shot on film. Zara, as a brand, shoots most of its work on film.
Yeah.
That's a fast fashion brand using a slow medium, slow in whatever the terms everyone thinks of it. And that shows me that the environment is accepting that this medium is here and it's being used and it's practical. It's not a fringe thing. Whereas 10 years ago, it was still talked about as being a fringe.
It's an option. I think, like you said, 10 years ago, enthusiasts, you and me probably were like the enthusiasts buying film cameras and buying film. We saw a decrease. I think what we've seen is more people shooting film, people that are new to film, people that are new to photography as a whole.
Yeah.
People, yes, obviously we all have a phone that takes photos and all kinds of things, but that will continue to increase. And in 10 years, we'll have kind of all society age shooting film or knowing about film, as in we still have a lot of work where some people today see you with a camera and they're like, is that a video camera? It's a still camera. Oh, well, how does it, film's still made? That conversation will increase in no people will not know that it doesn't exist. They'll know that Kodak is still around. They'll know black and white. I think that will continue. And that's why I always say, if you want photography to exist from a very, I always say that I'm egoist. I don't know how you say that in English. Selfish. Yeah. I will tell people film exists.
Yeah.
Not because I want them to shoot film. I want them to buy film so I can continue to buy it. So it's kind of like that. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen. In 10 years, we'll see a lot more people shooting film.
Well, so a related question that I think will feed into this is, what will photography look like? If we remove the analog from the question, I think it's important to think of how is the landscape changing. And we were talking a little bit before we started filming about things like Apple's Vision Pro and Meta's Quest and Apple pushing this spatial 3D. It's stereoscopic photography, right? They've given it a new name, but it's been around for 150 years. That's still stills.
Yeah.
It's 3D, but we all know that's old tech. It's old tech repackaged because it's still interesting.
Yeah.
And photography is not going to become not interesting. Like we're going to see, I think we'll see more advances. It was, I think 2010, 2011 when we had the Lytro camera. Do you remember that light field camera?
Yeah.
It didn't last at the time, but I think it was just a little too far ahead.
Yeah.
A lot of the smartphones are incorporating some of that tech now where you can choose your focal point after having shot it, and it's kind of faking it, the depth of field, but using the depth map, the IR depth map. But it's like it's a more accessible, more easily understandable version of what was pretty impressive tech.
Yeah.
And so like this ebb and flow of people still trying to figure out how to keep photography interesting. I don't think actually photography is boring. We have more people shooting pictures now in a single day, more photos being taken in a single day than 20 or 30 years ago were taken in an entire year.
Yeah.
So
and
photography itself is not going away. And as long as that's true,
Gonna make a piece of the pie be bigger.
yeah, everything just keeps increasing relatively.
And I think that is very interesting also worldwide. We have this concept that or the internet revolves almost too much around the US and the UK because it's English and so forth. Mm-hmm. But if you think about, let's say, the Middle East, their photography wasn't acceptable in all of the countries, like because of religious reasons, at least like photography in the sense of taking photos of humans. But now everyone has a phone on their pocket and social media. So everyone is taking photos of humans. Mm-hmm. And that then all of a sudden increases the amount of, okay, I'm interested in photography. And that increases the amount of, okay, I'm interested in analog photography. And the same will happen with happens in South Asia. The same happens in Africa, that everyone takes photos. Everyone has access to some kind of camera. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that want to go deeper or want to, like we were discussing before the cameras were on, that want a certain look. Like I love my Nikon, and it has a Summilux 50 millimeter, and with the shallow depth of field, I get something that is technically it's formed by glass and light rays and chemistry, but it has nothing to do with the real world or like reality as we see it as humans. Mm-hmm. So I would still say that the global like worldwide photography scene will explode at some point, or like it's at least more accessible. Then it's a question that will there be some meta photography that is the actual photography or
I mean, we're pushing the envelope of imaging a lot. Like you said, the virtual reality, the AR glasses, the VR glasses are pushing photography or video or spatial awareness a lot in a virtual world. Mm-hmm. Most of the time. And we're on screens, we're on Zoom calls, we're watching TV, we're doing all these things where we're not touching things. Then photography, analog photography specifically, becomes like the other option. And it's not that it's one or the other, it's both coexist, and you will have maybe your AR vision things, but also will be like, it's time to take off my glasses, stand up, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'll use my phone to make a spatial video that I'll show my family on the other side of the world, but also gonna take a couple of stills because you know what? I kind of measure the light and I'm gonna focus the picture, and the focus is when I took the photo, not the aftermarket photo focus. Like it kind of becomes the alternative where it's everybody will be doing this because we're going that way. Everybody's on a phone. Nobody used to be on a phone. Like now everybody will be like, well, now I need something that's not a screen. Now I need like get up. Like we all have Zoom meetings. The moment you meet with someone in a bar and have a drink and talk, or tea or coffee, whatever, it's so much more relatable, so much nicer that we miss the human engagement. Photography will miss the physical photography so much that I think it'll grow just by that.
Well, I think it's a recent increase, but I think we'll see more of it. We talked again a little bit before this chat about there being, it's not really a backlash, that's the wrong term for it, but with people shooting on smartphones so much, and with the technology, a mixture of hardware and software, but mostly software, trying to do whatever it can to improve the quality, the subjective quality of what is being captured of that image, starting to feel less real. Again, it's not really real unless we're looking at it with our eyes, but
you're always cropping something.
We're seeing options start to pop up in terms of various apps on smartphones that are removing a lot of the post-processing that happens by default with a lot of the default cameras, because people are starting to react to that post-processing being too much.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from the same place, that desire comes from the same place that the desire for analog photography comes from. It's like we don't actually want that pendulum to swing too far. We know when it's swung too far, and we kind of naturally start going, let's pull back a little bit. Just like we see, I don't know if your kids are like this, but I know friends' children who are like this, where if they're on social media, or they could be on social media, they're kind of already in their teens and maybe even preteens going, I don't need to be doing that. That's like, it's too much.
Interesting.
It's not that interesting. Where we've gone where the pendulum is swung all the way, and then people are naturally kind of going, don't need that. I want to exist in the real world more. And again, what's the version of photography that exists the most in the real world is the tangible medium. So I don't think that analog photography is going to change, because it is what it is. If it changed, it would become something else.
Yeah.
I think it can adapt. I'm doing stereoscopic photography on analog now because of this rise of digital ways to view it, because that's really interesting to me. The stereoscopic photography itself is no different than it was in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Right? It's just found a new avenue to be displayed. And I think that's just going to be true. We're going to keep remixing and using the mediums that are available. We'll start using AI tools to do retouching, to remove dust, like you said. Like, there will be ways that we can use the advances in technology to show more people our analog photography, or to make it easier to catalog. I would love better AI tools that would be available to me to just use machine learning to tag all my photos.
Tell me what I took on.
Yeah.
Well,
but at the same time, I find AI to be partly the biggest threat to photography in general, because now, I mean, at least in terms of commercialness, if you want to make a commercial photo shoot, you can type the prompt basically.
To general photography, yes.
Yes, and then to extend the barriers of what is real, like the new Google phone, you can literally add yourself into a group photo. You go take it, then you change the person taking group photo, and then the camera with it in itself already adds the person.
But in a way, it's like, I just think historically, like, that how different is that than composites or collages 100 years ago, right? It's what people have always been retouching photos.
Now it's democratized.
It's democratized and it's automated, but it's not actually that new a concept.
Yeah.
The implementation is what's new.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're all safe from it.
Yeah.
I believe that humans want to make things.
Yeah.
We like it when technology helps us make that thing, but we don't really want technology to make the things for us, not the things that we like making. Like, if AI can do our taxes, great. No one wants to do that. We're happy for that to happen, and it should be happening. Yeah. Like, why the heck I know this is a problem in the US more than it is anywhere else, but why people have to manually file their taxes when all this information is digital already? It's like, that should just be there, and we tick a box. Does it line up? Yes, great, you're done. Like it does in other countries. Yeah. But I don't think that art, and then photography is not just art, it's also documenting things, but let's just look at the documentation side of it, journalism or any documentary work. Yeah. We don't want to have our own point of view replaced with that thing. We might put ourselves in a picture, but we were still there, right? Like, the software just helped put us in there. We want to be able to know that that's that that's real and that actually happened. And I think everyone inherently understands that. Whether that's analog or digital, I think that all is a bit mixed into how we feel about the thing that we've made.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw with the new Google AI camera phone, the really worrying thing for me was that you could basically go like, okay, like, hey, we are here at the mountain range. The mountains don't look epic enough. Make them look nicer, and change the time of day, and you know, and it will make it much easier for people to lie about reality.
That's worrying, and I don't think, bluntly, I don't think Google should have released that, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just. But at some point, people have to be responsible for their actions, and I think we'll realize within a couple of years that things like that are just not good for us.
Yeah, but that's a good question. That will that bring more value back into the physical act of photography?
It already does.
Yeah, it already does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and again, I think your average run-of-the-mill consumer understands that.
Yeah.
Like they get that. If you said, hey, like, if you had your choice between a photo that maybe was manipulated or not and one that you could prove wasn't in a given context, like they'd rather the unmanipulated one if it's something that matters like that. You know, if it's art, who cares? Art can be whatever you want. I don't mind AI art. I mind where the source of that comes from, and that's its own topic, like the morals of how you've trained something. But as an artist, like I want to have tools that make me like save time and spend less time in front of a screen. If that's AI somehow, great, and it's responsible to use.
I mean, digital cameras could be the predecessor to the AI in a way. Like film was a medium that took time and you developed, and you see the silver, you see all that. Digital's digital, like it's like voodoo in a way. The first person that probably saw a digital camera was like, what the heck, that was that? Now we have AI, digital shooters are like, what the heck is that? Like it'll become a tool. Photography will have like the three mediums, the film version, the digital version, the made in artificial intelligence version, and people will pick and choose, and that's fine. It just creates a even more complex morals and complex situation of what the reality is, which then makes the completely opposite version, which is the film one, be like, oh, actually, this is more valuable. And I would be like, if you were going to take photos of my family, and you said, hey, I can take photos with a, I don't know, Mamiya RB67, or I can take photos with my phone and then add your grandpa that passed away 2 years ago, I'd be like, that might be a little too much.
And again, this
like, that'd be too much. But I can do it. I just saw a video of something like that. So that's where you will, and people will start valuing, and I've done that at weddings. I've shot as a guest, but with a film camera, with a Leica, and shot my photos as a guest and talked to the photographer, obviously, like, hey, can I kind of like be on the side, not the ceremony, but the after. And they said, like, you do your thing. And I shot that. And I've given prints to the people that got married, and they've been like, oh, these are the ones we'll put on the wall. The ones that the photographer took, like, yeah, they're nice, but like they're for the family side. But the ones they have are the silver prints. Silver gelatin prints are the ones on the wall. Because they saw that as a value of effort, of time. Is it reasonable? One could argue. But it's what they valued. And I think people will continue.
And the technological progress will happen regardless. And again, like, people have been erased from photos or added to photos since well before we had any digital technology to do that. So the idea of manipulation, which is whether it's AI or anything else, like or different versions of digital versus analog, we've always had that. Like that, I don't think that's anything particularly new. It's just, again, new implementations, new forms. The trajectory of photography has always been consistent. We have so much more video now being created by people, in addition to stills. Stills haven't gone away. If you were to only look at what Instagram promotes and judge photography based on that, you'd be like, oh, well, photography doesn't matter anymore. But that's not the truth. People are still taking pictures constantly. Like, again, anecdotal evidence. I think of the parents that I know, like including my sister-in-law. There are lots of videos taken of the kids because it's so easy to take a video now. But there are many more photos that are being taken and shared in my family's group chat of my nieces and nephews than the videos, because it's easier to see the story of what's been happening. Here's a day in photos. I can't show the day in videos. It would take too long.
that's true.
And the photo, that's where the value of the photo, digital or analog, that's where the value of the photo lives, in that classic phrase, a picture tells 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Like that isn't, I've probably just messed up that phrase too. 1,000 words is worth a picture. Where there are too many different versions of it, but you understand, you get my point. Like there is so much value in the story of a single image that is different than, not better or worse, but different than what you can do in video. So even though you could say video is going to replace stills, it's not.
Yeah.
It's different, and they work well together, but they're not going to kill it off. So yeah, I think photography is safe, basically. The short version, photography is safe. I think analog photography 10 years from now will, if anything, have even more value compared to whatever technological progress we have had in that 10 years in the digital world, because analog isn't changing. And that's I think that's the value of analog, is its consistency.
Yeah.
That it doesn't change. It is, we have understood what it is, we have established what it is, and like as long as it doesn't die, it's consistent and it's reliable because of that.
And we know it.
Yep.
That is kind of a positive bombshell to end our 3-man conversation, like a top
10
tier.
years, we'll still be talking here.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness.
Well, to wrap it up then, how about a question for you?
Yeah.
From the perspective of camera rescue, you've been asking us all these questions, but from specifically with camera rescue and how that connects to Kamerastore and all of what you see. Obviously, you talked earlier about how many cameras there are in the world that we haven't even touched. Are you, quick answer, positive or negative about the 10 years ahead of us for analog?
I'm very positive, but at the same time, my worry is scaling. Like, will be able to scale repair technicians, mechanics, those in camera, like, can we move the know-how to a broad enough amount of people? Because now people are not servicing their cameras. And I calculated one day that just with the Hasselblads of the world that have been manufactured, if every 10th of them was still available and they would get a service every 3 years like they're supposed to, you would need 100 full-time mechanics just to run that little machine.
So please run those numbers at some point, because I would love to see those published. It would make it all feel very tangible right now.
Yeah, but like that would be 100 for the Hasselblads, which are
nuts.
which are very niche camera model. So that's my main worry. It's not that it couldn't be done, or like, but is it feasible? Is there enough people willing to make? Because it will be a craftsmanship kind of long-term decades of work that you enter into the learning of it and all of that. But at the same time, I mean, that's what we're doing. So, and that's what we're trying to champion here. So we're doing our best. But I'm kind of also excited to talk about this in public and hope to I mean, I get messages almost every week into the Instagram account that, hey, you inspired me to start finding cameras in Costa Rica. And I'm like, Costa Rica? Like, we're in Finland. I didn't even know Costa Rica had an analog scene. And then, like, we had a developing machine, extra developing machine, because we stopped running our lab. And we got guys from Mongolia, Chile, Alberta, like all over, but being like, hey, I want to start a lab. Can you ship the developing machine here? And I'm like, well, but at the same time, there was like 20 labs in the Nordics only asking for it.
Amazing.
And so the volume is there, and the interest is much bigger than kind of expected. So I'm very positive. It's just about, will we scale enough and
scaling sustainably.
Yeah.
Yep.
Human sustainable and like camera sustainable.
Well, and isn't that the crux of the conversation around the circular economy? Is sustainability. And I think every aspect of it has to be sustainable. You have to scale sustainably. You have to pay people a living wage so that their lives are sustainable.
Like you have to be able to like maintain, because we could have double the mechanics and double the technicians probably, but it becomes a human problem because there's all kinds of standards and creating guidelines and creating rules, and because we're using a used medium, like you said, it's the last medium that we're still relying on old things. It's like everybody's eyes is different. Like, I think we should save those, or we should save those. So like, it's a very complex game to play with us under one roof. We're now at a size of around, bigger than ever, probably bigger than many operations back in the day of like even camera servicing.
Technically, we have the biggest service, film camera service in Finnish history, or I think even Nordic history, because they were obviously fragmented by brand back in the day. But like we've surpassed that moment already.
It's extremely complex to do. The cameras are probably the least complex part. And it's because humans are complex and learning is complex. And like I said, not only the know-how, but the way you approach the servicing. Like there's people that cut corners and maybe that's not good. And like it's a very complex situation. That's where I worry because I run the operations. Like, how can I do this without burning it down? Because I want to grow it, but it's like kind of like a living material that you expand, and you gotta wait a little bit before you can expand it again. It's a little bit like that.
I think that's the important thing. I'm glad to hear that though, because it would be easy to cut a lot of corners and just try and scale. The demand is kind of there. The potential would be there, but if you don't scale responsibly, then it all falls down.
And you burn bridges with customers. And we scaled unresponsibly, not only our humans that are here, but the humans we service with our cameras and their memories, you burn them. And like, we are not trying to sell a camera just to get rid of it and turn to the next customer because like we said, the demographic is growing, maybe they'll never come again. No, we're trying to keep them within the hobby and the photography and the profession because we want them to continue doing it. And maybe in a few years, they sell us their camera that they need servicing. We buy it for a little less because we will service it and give them a service one. Maybe that's our way of turning the wheel with gear. Yeah, it's complex.
I think that's what I think is needed for these next 10 years to head in a positive direction is people like you guys. And, like you said earlier, you're not the only people who are doing the right thing when it comes to servicing. But if we didn't have anyone doing it and talking about it, it's why these conversations are so important, is that people need to understand that this is needed. Otherwise, it will just kind of wither away and die. Film would not have survived without people who are passionate about film, including the Hollywood directors, championing it and fighting for it. And it's nice to know that it's not just, one photographer here and there kind of screaming from a rooftop saying, no, this is great, it's still alive, we need to keep using it.
And we would love to see, at least I know Juho probably loves to see like people trying to take it also scalable.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of one-man bands and small shops that are trying their best, but like the thing that we've done here is trying to figure out a way to grow it sustainably, not just because we could be two guys in a garage. And, Juho's not a mechanic himself. I've seen him with power.
That's what people can't see here. This is just a garage here with some lights.
But the goal is that we've tried to break that, and it's a complex situation. People ask all the time, like, how? And it's like...
There's a lot of IT, and there's a lot of finding repair manuals from dodgy basements and, and trying to make sense of them and all of that. But I think... it's time to end the conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to turn the interview around a little bit and ask you a question for that. Because it's important that people hear your perspective on this, and that it fills me with hope.
I think it's time to end the conversation. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. We get bored talking just the two of us or just the 40 of us here. It's always nice to have visitors from, well, as far as, as possible. You're not that far from us, luckily. But the series on history and cameras and Dan still continues. Thank you for joining this video, and see you on the next one.